I was walking my dog Stella around my neighborhood. I've been at a craft fair all day and was super tired because it had been raining and I hadn't made much money. I was asked to walk Stella just after I'd gotten back with my mom and I said yes. We head out, and I'm strolling along, watching the sky because it's looking like it's going to pour and I don't have a raincoat on, just an oversized hoodie. I hear a car turn down the street I'm walking on with Stella and don't think much of it. It gets closer to me and slows down. I assume it's gonna turn into a driveway, but I look back just to be cautious. The car, I believe it was a Chevrolet, but I know it's not. It's just one of those car brands with the name of it spelled out on the front. I just do not remember the name of the brand. The car didn't have a front license plate. This is illegal in Canada. In Canada, you must have both front and back license plates, though if your car is from the US but you now live or are just in Canada, you're all good. The car doesn't turn into a driveway. I'm a little more unsettled now. I hear it slowly getting closer and closer to me, so I pull Stella to the other side of me off the road. I am even more frightened when I hear one of the doors on the car open as it is driving. I mutter to myself, here we go, I better be able to scream well. A hand grabs my wrist and jerks me towards the car. I wrestle with the guy for a couple of seconds and then I scream. I've not screamed in quite a while. I'm quite a quiet teen unless I'm with my friends. The dude jerks his arm again and Stella, being the silly goof she is, finally clues in that I'm in danger. She pounces at the guy, grabbing onto his leg with her jaws and making him scream like a girl. One thing to note is that Stella is part terrier. Terriers are rat killers, so when they grab onto something, they're not letting go. The guy has loosened his grip on me by now, and I seize the opportunity and kick him hard enough to make him drop if he'd been standing. He shrieks and lets go of me, which makes Stella let go of his leg. I grabbed her and sprinted back to my house. I caught the license plate. I don't remember it now, and it was from New Brunswick. I am in British Columbia. I'm scared to think how far the two men would have gone with me if Stella hadn't been with me. This was back in January early this year. My friend and I had just started working on our film project and were getting ideas of locations to shoot the film. We drove to a swinging bridge about an hour away from our hometown. It was your usual unsturdy bridge that was about 400 feet long and 60 feet above water. This bridge was only meant for walking, no running, biking, etc. across it. It was parallel to another bridge, one made for vehicles. My friend and I got a couple of shots of the bridge itself before we made our way to the other side, where there were train tracks and a neighborhood. About halfway across the bridge, we heard yelling coming from the other one. We looked, and it appeared to have been a lady, waving her arms like she was trying to get our attention. She called out a name, what I thought was Hayden or Aiden, which both of those were neither mine nor my friend's name. We yelled back, "We're not them," thinking that would be the end of the conversation. The woman just stood there staring at us. We tried to shrug it off as we thought it had been settled, but then the woman takes off full speed running across the bridge in the same direction we were going. We thought it was strange, but we just laughed it off and carried on. We made it to the other side of the bridge and began shooting footage near the train tracks. I know it's unsafe, but this was a regular crossing point for the bridge trail. While in the middle of a scene, I heard a familiar voice yell from behind me. It was the same woman yelling the same thing. She stood on top of the hill of that neighborhood across the tracks. Again, we yelled back that we don't know her and we're not who she thinks we are. This woman takes off running once again, but this time towards us. This frightened us, because why would this woman need to get to us that bad? My friend and I quickly grabbed our things and headed for the swinging bridge, even knowing we weren't supposed to run across. We walked super fast, which made the bridge sway. It's like our fight or flight kicked in. The lady had caught up to the start of the bridge by the time we made it halfway across, still yelling, but this time it was in a hateful voice. That was when I turned around to look once to see how far the distance between us was. The lady had stopped there at the start of the bridge, and I noticed she was holding something behind her back. Even though she had stopped running after us, we continued to bolt across the bridge. We turned back once we reached the other side to see the woman still standing there, fiddling with something in her hands. My friend pulled out her phone and began recording the woman. This made her turn back immediately and walk the other way. We never found out why she chased us or what she was holding in her hand. Sometimes I think back and wonder if maybe she needed help, but why not scream for help? I just find it strange that after we told her multiple times that we weren't the people she thought we were, and she still followed us. I had difficulty sleeping about a week after this incident, as I couldn't get the idea out of my head of what this woman wanted to do with us. I had never been so scared in my life. This happened about 2.5 years ago now, maybe 3. At the time, I was still finishing up my last semester of high school. Due to COVID, I only had 2 online classes to get my credits in, and the rest of the day I worked at a local smoothie shop, saving my pennies for college. Anyway, it was a Saturday night, and I was downtown with my boyfriend, hanging out at his apartment. We had a kind of schedule where during the week he would go to school and I would do my 2 classes and work, and then on weekends I would come stay with him in his apartment and we would spend our time together. I think we were playing Beer Kart, our version of Mario Kart that involved, you guessed it, chugging beer, and a couple of other people were hanging out with us. We were having a good time, and I thought that it would be a chill night in the apartment with friends. In the midst of our drunken virtual driving, my boyfriend got a text saying that his best friend's sister was in town, who I happened to be friends with, and the girls were going to go out and walk around campus or whatever. They were asking if I wanted to join them, and I immediately said no. I liked Phil's sister. Phil was my boyfriend's best friend, but she was the only one in the group who I actually liked. The rest of the people, I either didn't care for or didn't even know. Phil's girlfriend would be there as well, and I really couldn't stand being around her. My boyfriend told me it'd be good for me to go hang out with them, and that he wouldn't mind having a little time alone with the boys in the apartment to shoot the shit or whatever. The more he pressed that I leave and go out, the more I had this gut feeling like something bad was going to happen if I went. Do you ever get that feeling? I guess it's called intuition, but it's that feeling like you know something bad is going to happen and it would be best to just stick to your gut. Well, I finally caved and ignored my intuition, trying to be nice and give my boyfriend the guide time he seemed to want so desperately. He immediately texted the group and let them know that I would be joining them and to come pick me up outside the apartment. He lived on the top floor of the apartment, so he walked me down, and we saw a black, very loud car pull up. I saw the girls I knew poke their heads out the window and wave me over. That feeling struck me again hard as I started to say goodbye to my boyfriend and make my way over to the car. I didn't know who was driving. It was a guy, some friend of a friend who I had never met before. They said it was fine, but I kind of had a thing about getting in a car with strange men I don't know. I started to express this, but they told me it was fine, he was fine, and a friend and this and that and the other. You know how peer pressure goes. I finally get in, and this guy peels out before I'm even fully seated. He started driving like a maniac. Looking back, I'm sure he had been drinking, and was just being an overall asshole to the other drivers on the road and pedestrians crossing the street. Needless to say, I was freaking out the entire time. We finally found a spot near campus and we all got out. I gulped down the fresh air like I had just learned how to breathe. We started walking around and making our way towards campus. I tried to talk to the one girl who I was friends with, and it was fine for a while, but I still couldn't get rid of that feeling like something was wrong or bad. We ended up in a building on campus. Our keycards unlock almost all of the buildings 24/7, and we're hanging out in a lounge of some type, talking. The conversation took an inappropriate turn. Like I said, I really didn't like Phil's girlfriend and I had my reasons. She was always very vulgar and immature and seemed only capable of talking about sex. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a prude or allergic to fun. I don't mind a dirty joke or a conversation every now and then, but she was just being gross, sharing way too many details and just being completely inappropriate with her body language and actions. She was hardcore starting to flirt with the guy that drove us, and I could tell I wasn't the only one uncomfortable. After about 30 minutes of this, I texted my boyfriend and told him I was ready to come home. He said that he had been drinking and couldn't drive, and it would have been a hefty walk to the building, not to mention it was getting close to 12 a.m. and the streets weren't incredibly safe to walk around that time. He said to ask the guy who drove us if he wouldn't mind driving me home. I didn't want to ruin the vibe and have everyone mad at me, but I finally decided enough was enough, and I just wanted to be back at the apartment where it was safe and comfortable. I interrupted the flirting and vulgar conversation unfolding before me and asked if the guy could drive me home. I didn't even know his name, that's how much of a stranger he was to me. Phil's sister backed me up and said she was ready to go home too, and that made me feel better. He finally agreed, and we made our way out of the building back across campus into the car. He was obviously pissed at me, but at that point I didn't care. I just wanted to be out of that situation and go back to the apartment. We piled in for the second and last time that night, and this guy starts whipping it again like there's no tomorrow. I felt the panic take over me again, and I made my peace with God because I was sure that we were not going to make it back in one piece. This car was so loud, and granted, I don't know a lot about cars, but I know that he had taken parts off to make it incredibly loud, and it was a stick shift as well. He was shifting so jerkily and speeding up to pass on double yellows. He was just obnoxious, and I was scared we were going to get in a wreck, or worse, piss off the wrong people on the street, and end up in an even worse situation. Somehow, by the grace of God, is the only way I can think of how we ended up outside of my boyfriend's apartment. I was so ready to get out of there, and that bad feeling just kept building and building. He barely stops to let me out of the car, clearly pissed I interrupted his flirting session with Phil's girlfriend to make him drive me home. It's important to mention that all of the apartment complexes around here are locked from the outside due to the violent and homeless nature of the city. You have to scan a key card to get into the lobby, and then again into the elevators in most cases. This means that I had no way of getting into the apartment until my boyfriend came down from the top floor and let me in. I pulled out my phone as I got out of the car and texted him that I was outside. You know that rule when you're dropping someone off somewhere, especially at night, you wait to make sure they make it inside before you leave them? Well, the guy that was driving either didn't know that or was so pissed at me that he didn't care. I jumped as he tore off down the street, going the wrong way, revving the engine so loud that I gasped. Once again, it's about 12:30 a.m. The streets are quiet except for a few lurking figures, and he gunned it like a maniac. So there I was, all alone in the dark in the middle of the night, locked out of the apartment. Not to mention, I was dressed in an outfit that wasn't all that appropriate for being out by myself late at night. I wasn't anticipating being alone and wanted to look cute, but it ended up working against me in the end. All of a sudden, I heard some guys yelling. I looked across the street into the back parking lot of the grocery store where the trucks would deliver their inventory. It was deserted except for two cars, a black and a white one, with two men standing outside of them talking. They were incredibly difficult to see, as the parking lot was dark and there were no lights. They were looking right at me, and I thought maybe I had imagined the yelling until I was staring at them and saw one of them say, "Hey girl, what are you doing out here all alone?" Immediately, that panicky feeling overwhelmed me, and I internally started freaking out. This was not a good situation. I didn't let my panic show though. That's how you become an easy target. I've taken enough self-defense classes and spent enough time in the city to know that you never panic and you never let your weaknesses show on the outside. I calmly ignored him and walked to the door and gave it a slight pull, praying to God that the lock would be broken and it would open. Obviously it didn't, and that's when I knew I messed up. Those guys were watching my every move, continuing to yell things at me like, "Come over here girl, and we'll show you a good time." Things like that. Once they saw that I pulled on the door and was locked outside, the game was on. They knew I had nowhere to go, that I was trapped outside. All of a sudden, they jumped in their respective cars. They drove across the street to where I was standing on the sidewalk and pulled their cars up onto the actual sidewalk, blocking me both in front and behind, basically making it so that I couldn't run anywhere. I was stuck in the middle of their cars, and they started to get out and come towards me. It was so synchronized. I knew that this was not their first time targeting someone. They knew exactly what they were doing, and I feel awful for any other girl who has been targeted by these terrible men. By this point, I had called my boyfriend after the jerk that drove me peeled off and left me there by myself. I started screaming into the phone, just screaming in general, hoping anyone would hear me and hoping more that my boyfriend would hurry and let me in the lobby. The men kept creeping closer to me, still catcalling me, but I don't remember what they were saying at that point.
I was too busy screaming trying to get someone's attention. I know at one point they had started saying things to me that were increasingly sexual, suggesting things they could do to me or that I could do to them if I just went with them. In the nick of time, my boyfriend slammed open the side door to the building and yelled at me to hurry. I ran to him just in time before the men got to me. Once they saw my boyfriend, they started running to their respective cars. They jumped in and took off down the street, going the wrong direction just to make a quick escape. Needless to say, I was in hysterics by that point. My boyfriend got me up to the apartment, kicked everyone out, and drew me a bath. He asked what happened, and through tears I told him. He asked if I wanted to call the police, but I knew it would be pointless. Plus, we were both underage and had been drinking, and I didn't want to start some trouble with that. Once he found out that the guy driving had left me there and that his engine revving is what got the men's attention in the first place, he was livid. He started calling everyone, asking them who the hell the guy driving us was and what happened. The girls heard what happened and ended up coming over later, even though I told everyone I wanted to be alone. They hugged me and pretended to care, but if they cared, they would have told the driver to wait until I got in the building safely. I never hung out with them again. It took me a while to get over that, but now I've pretty much made peace with it. I live alone in my own apartment in the city now, and the boyfriend and I aren't together anymore. I'm pretty good at looking out for myself these days, and those experiences just teach you how to be stronger and be careful. I just remember thinking as those men were coming closer and closer to me, I'll never see my mom again. It wasn't that I was afraid of being taken or dying. I mean, I was, but the only thought that ran through my head over and over again was my mom. I find it comical now, in a sick way, how people always cry for the mom in painful or bad situations. I guess that's based in truth, because she was all I could think about during that couple-minute ordeal that felt like a lifetime. I guess the moral of this story is to be careful. Men, women, whoever, just be careful. Have fun, but look out for yourself. And when you have that awful gut-wrenching intuition that maybe tonight you should stay home instead of going out, you should always listen. It just might save your life.